hold her eagle, and my arm is just, okay, I can't hold this very long. That was the highlight of the trip. What would you like to know? I was in the Anza-Borrego Desert State Park, volunteering for state parks to count bighorn sheep over the July 4th weekend in the desert. I was sitting in a jury lounge for the San Diego County Courts, and a woman sitting next to me in the same jury lounge was asking questions of, well, how did you get jury duty, and the usual questions you'd be asking people in jury duty lounge because you don't have much to do anyway. And I started asking her some questions back, and we started talking about different parks, and she said, oh yeah, I do a sheep count on July 4th. And I said, really? So I asked her, well, how do I participate in that? Where do I get some information? So she told me, and I called up the parks at the appropriate time before the count, and she said, oh, great, yeah, you're in, you should be able to do it. So I started doing that. In 1980 was my first count. Actually, they worked together in that when I started working for national parks in different states of the United States, I was in Utah working at Arches National Park, and we had to put together programs, campfire programs for people staying in the parks. And one of the ways we would do that was use slides for interpretive purposes. And most of the slides that the parks had were from their library, and I couldn't really relate very well to them because they weren't my photographs. So I started taking my own photographs so I could illustrate the programs that I did for national parks. And I got into photography mostly that way, of taking my own photographs for the programs, and just continued doing that, taking more photographs. I first went to school while I was still working for national parks in Sacramento. I went to Sacramento State and got a degree in Recreation Park Administration, and so that started me in my parks career. The parks, seasonal work for national parks was kind of hit or miss. I couldn't really get a seasonal job in one park and then a seasonal job in another park. What would happen is people would be working, say, at Everglades for the winter season, and they would go to Death Valley for the winter season, or vice versa, rather. But Everglades would be in a different season. But anyway, so you would try to line up season to season so you'd be working, and I could never get it to click. So I came back to San Diego after several seasons and started working for county parks in 1980 for 10 years, and got tired of doing a lot of different jobs, not any one particular job, and just got tired of doing a lot of maintenance work and decided to go into photography, and it was recommended that I go to Brooks by George Lepp, who's a well-known nature photographer. He said, well, if you're really serious about getting into commercial photography, you should go to Brooks, which is where he went. And that made my decision as to, okay, yes, I'm very serious about this, and that's what I want to do. So I went to Brooks. It's of course really involved, because you have to go shoot film, set up your assignment with your models, your location, and then come back, process all your film, print it, mount it. So a really long process in order to get your finished product, in order to be able to get it to critique. Compared to digital, it was just starting to come in when I was leaving, really. We were working in Photoshop, so we were able to do some digital projects, but it was still mostly analog, mostly film processing and dealing with film that way. So it was a much more involved process. That's a Cinereus vulture, which I guess you'd have to debate. It's supposed to be the largest vulture in the world, bigger than an Andean condor.
So that's not fake. That is
a chick.
That's a lie. live?
Yeah, that's a live vulture.
Oh my gosh, that is so crazy.
They're really big.
That is so wild.
They had a hood over the head to cover the eyes
Yeah.
to keep it calm,
Oh, okay.
because they would take it in, they would weigh it, measure wing spread, probably take a blood sample, and then they would put a tag on the wing, and then they would put a radio pack transponder around its neck so they could follow it. What they were trying to do was to see where its flight was, where it would go from and then to. So they had researchers from South Korea, India, and Mongolia. Since the vultures would fly through all of those countries, they wanted to be able to track it and find out exactly where it went. Probably half of them are from Mongolia,
Wow.
and the other half are from Anza-borrego, because what happened with, in part, the Anza-borrego Foundation and the state park rangers, one went over at one point and found that they needed some help in really organizing their park, their reserve, in order to protect it more. And it was really more of a park on paper, not really a physical entity. So the manager said, well, we can help you do this, and so that you can better protect your resources, which were the big Argali sheep, which you see in one of the photographs, and a Siberian ibex, because a lot of the foreign countries around Mongolia were going in and shooting them for game meat. So they were protected, but they didn't really know how to do the job of protecting them very well. So the manager went over there, took some other rangers, trained them in law enforcement, interpretation, education techniques, how to do boundaries, and how to look for archaeological digs, which they wanted to do as well. So they didn't do that for them, they trained them so they could have those skills and do it on their own. And ever since then, the former superintendent of Anza-borrego started leading these trips. He led the first one we went on in successive trips. It's all Canon equipment. I've been using Canon since I was first time in college. And I've stuck with it just because their cameras are reliable. I've never had any problems, even though most dealers will offer you some kind of insurance. I never buy it because I never have any problems with the cameras.
That's good. That's really
So it's all Canon equipment. I've got the new Canon R, which is, it's not perfect, but it's much lighter. And since I like to go hiking a lot, I like my equipment to be pretty much as light as I can get it. So I'm not carrying around a lot of weight. The glue, I think, will only last a certain amount of time, so it'll fall off.
Yeah.
It's not designed to stay on there forever.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So they'll clip the spikes off the hedgehog, the spines, in order to put the glue on there. And the hedgehog it's under a light anesthetic, otherwise it causes too much stress. The sheep photograph, the top one is mine. The bottom one I didn't take. It was from a doctor who was going over there and helping the Mongolian rangers. So that one was not mine. The top one, the bighorn, though, eating the cactus, which is a normal behavior. They would take their horns and they would shear off the top of a barrel cactus because the flesh is very moist. It's got a lot of water in it. So it's almost like having a canteen out there to drink from. They would get some nutrients, but mostly moisture. I like to photograph the sheep out there, which aren't all that easy because the light can be really bad. Sometimes you're photographing during the middle of the day. They do stay still, but they're hard to spot. There's one photographer who's taken, I don't know how many thousands of photographs, but he makes it a point. He goes out there and he's doing it all the time. I only get, 2.5 days to go out there. So I'm really glad to be able to get lots of different behavior photographs of the sheep as well. And I'll donate them to the state parks so they can use them, show other people what behavior is like, what the sheep look like.
Yeah, that's really neat.